What kind of woman looks a grieving rancher in the eye and says she is not fit for any man, but can still love his children? And why did that single sentence leave him unable to answer? What did she already know about loss that he had not yet dared to admit about himself? In the spring of 1887, the high plains outside Cheyenne still looked wide enough to swallow a man's sorrow without a trace. The land rolled on in pale grass and dust, stitched together by fence lines, windmills, and distance. From far away, Nathan Hale's ranch looked solid, functional, respectable. A good house, a working barn, stock in the corral, smoke from the chimney at dawn. But inside that house, everything had been out of rhythm for more than a year. Nathan had lost his wife, Clara, the winter before, to a fever that moved too fast and left too little behind. Since then, the ranch had kept going only because it had to. Horses still needed water. Fences still broke. The cattle still drifted if a gate was left wrong. And children, unlike grief, did not wait quietly in a corner until a man felt ready. There were 4 of them, Matthew and Noah, the 8-year-old twins, all elbows and noise, forever running where they should have walked. Rose, 6, small and watchful, already old in the eyes, the way children get when a house loses its mother too soon. And the baby, Anna, not yet 2, who had begun forgetting the sound of Clara's voice before Nathan had learned how to survive hearing his own. That was the thing no one told a widower. People would speak of heartbreak as though it were one clean wound. It was not. It was 100 practical failures that followed a man through the day. Burned biscuits, unmended hems, a child waking in the night and calling for the wrong person, socks that vanished, fever scares, silence at supper, the terrifying feeling that love alone was not enough to keep a household from slowly coming apart. Nathan did what he could. He rose before light. He worked until dark. He learned how to braid Rose's hair badly enough to make her laugh on good mornings and cry on bad ones. He fed the baby with one hand while writing feed tallies with the other. He listened to the twins fight over nothing and hated himself on the days he shouted too fast. Some evenings he sat at the kitchen table long after the children slept, staring at Clara's empty chair as if exhaustion might somehow turn memory back into instruction. Neighbors noticed. They always do. Some sent casseroles. Some sent advice. 1 or 2 suggested, with that frontier bluntness that could sound practical and cruel in the same breath, that what he needed was another wife. Nathan never answered those remarks well. Sometimes he walked away. Sometimes he went still. Once he said, "A woman is not a missing harness strap you replace because the old one broke." After that, people mostly stopped speaking so plainly in front of him. Still, the problem remained. The ranch house had taken on the worn look of a place being held together by effort instead of order. Rose tried too hard to help with the baby. The twins had started eating like wolves and behaving like colts. Anna cried for long stretches in the afternoon unless someone held her. Nathan was running out of hands. Then, one morning, just after sunrise, he saw a woman standing beyond the gate. She was dressed simply in a faded blue work dress beneath a dark shawl, with a small valise set down in the dirt beside her boots. She did not look frightened. She looked tired in the way only the truly alone ever look, careful with their hope. Nathan walked toward the gate, one hand still dusty from the stable. "Can I help you?" She inclined her head slightly before answering. "My name is Lynn May." Her English was measured and clear, softened by an accent he could not place at first. "I was told there may be work here." Nathan studied her. Chinese. A widow, perhaps, or maybe not. Hard to tell. She was not old, but sorrow had a way of changing age. There was restraint in her posture, dignity in the way she waited. Not pleading, not demanding, just standing as though she had trained herself never to expect welcome too quickly. "What kind of work?" he asked. "Cooking, cleaning, laundry, child care." Then, after the smallest pause, "Anything honest." Before Nathan could answer, the twins came tearing around the side of the house. Rose followed more slowly, carrying Anna on her hip with absurd seriousness. All three children stopped when they saw the stranger. Matthew asked first, "Who's that?" Lynn May looked at the children, and for the first time her face changed. Not into cheerfulness, into something quieter and deeper. Recognition, maybe, or ache. Rose stepped closer. "Are you visiting?" Lynn May lowered herself to one knee so she would not tower over them. "Only if your father says I may." Anna reached toward the tassel edge of Lynn May's shawl with curious fingers. Lynn May did not pull away. Nathan felt something tighten in his chest at that small, gentle moment. He had seen plenty of adults smile at children. He had learned to distrust easy charm. But this was different. There was no performance in it, just patience. "Where did you come from?" he asked. Lynn May rose. "From Laramie last. Before that, farther west." A freight wagon rattled somewhere on the road beyond the pasture. Wind moved through the grass in long silver strokes. Nathan should have said no. It would have been simpler, safer. The town already talked too much. A lone rancher bringing an unknown Chinese woman into a house full of children would give them something new to chew on for months. But then Anna began fussing. The twins started jostling at the gate. Rose looked exhausted again, though she was only 6 years old. And in that moment, practicality outweighed pride. "I can offer room," Nathan said carefully, "and wages once the month turns. Starting now, if the work suits." Lynn May gave a small nod. "That is fair." Nathan reached for the valise before he quite realized he was doing it. As he led her toward the house, he told himself this was labor, nothing more, a necessary arrangement. One tired adult helping another tired household stay upright. He did not know then that by sunset she would say one sentence that would follow him through every room of that house. And once he heard it, he would not be able to go back to thinking of her as merely help. Lynn May entered the ranch house the way some people step into a church after a long absence, quietly, with respect for what had been lost there. She did not stare at Clara's sewing basket left untouched near the hearth. She did not comment on the stack of unfolded linens on the table, or the uneven row of children's boots by the door, or the fact that a skillet still sat unwashed from breakfast. She simply asked where Nathan kept the flour, where the water buckets were filled, and whether the baby napped before or after midday. By noon, the kitchen no longer looked defeated. That was the first change. Not magic, not transformation, just order. Dough rising under a cloth, potatoes peeled. A stew started with onions and beef bone and the last of the winter carrots. Rose seated at the table shelling peas instead of trying to balance Anna on one hip. The twins sent outside with instructions so precise even they seemed impressed by them. "Boots off before you come back in," Lin May told them. "What if we forget?" Noah asked. "Then I will remind you once." "And if we forget twice?" She looked at him steadily. "Then I will remember for you." Nathan, listening from the doorway, nearly smiled. Children test weakness before they trust kindness. He had learned that since Clara died. But the twins did not smell weakness in Lin May. They sensed structure. That made all the difference. By the end of the first week, each child had found a separate path toward her. Matthew admired competence and followed her when she kneaded dough or mended shirts, asking practical questions about everything. Noah loved story and sound and began hovering near her in the evenings just to hear the cadence of her voice. Rose responded first to gentleness. When Lin May redid the poor braid Nathan had attempted that morning, she did so without criticism, without even a look that might embarrass him. She simply said, "Your father tried with love. Now let us try with ribbon too." Rose laughed so hard she snorted. Even Anna, who mistrusted sudden movements and cried when strangers reached too quickly for her, settled against Lin May's shoulder within days, as though some buried instinct had recognized safety. Nathan noticed all of it. He also noticed himself noticing, which unsettled him more. In town, whispers began almost immediately. A Chinese widow working at Nathan Hale's place. A strange arrangement. A risky one. Was she from the railroad camps? From a laundry house? From some mining settlement farther west? Had he hired help or invited trouble? Nathan heard pieces of it in the feed store and pretended not to. Frontier towns could make a feast out of any life that looked different from their own. He was not afraid of gossip for himself. What troubled him was the idea of those whispers reaching his children before they were old enough to understand why adults often choose cruelty over curiosity. At supper one evening, after a long, hot day of branding calves, he found Lin May on the porch steps watching the children chase fireflies in the yard. The sky over the plains had turned gold, then lavender, then the soft bruised blue that comes before full dark. "You've done good work here," he said. She inclined her head. "Your children make it easy." He looked out at them, the twins tumbling through dry grass, Rose cradling Anna on a quilt, all four of them cleaner, calmer, brighter than they had been in months. "No," he said quietly. "They haven't been easy for some time." Lin May said nothing right away. The silence between them held, but it did not feel empty. Finally, she spoke. Grieving children are often loud. It is the quiet ones who worry me most. Nathan turned toward her. That was not the sort of thing most people said unless they knew something of sorrow themselves. Rose? He asked. Lin May's gaze remained on the yard. Rose tries to become useful before anyone asks it of her. That is a heavy thing for a child. The accuracy of it left him raw. He sat down one step below her, hat in his hands. You see a lot for someone who hasn't been here long. I have lived in homes where grief rearranged everything, she said. Nathan waited, but she offered nothing more. The next afternoon brought the moment he would replay for weeks. It was hot, the air still, the sort of late spring heat that settled low over the yard and made every sound travel farther. The twins had worn themselves out chasing each other around the pump. Rose was drawing circles in the dust with a stick. Anna was asleep inside. Lin May stood at the clothesline pinning up shirts while Nathan repaired a broken latch on the chicken coop. He straightened when he heard her say, very softly, "Mr. Hale?" He crossed the yard. Something wrong? She kept her attention on the white shirt in her hands. I should say this plainly now, before the town says it badly later. Nathan felt a warning stir in his chest. Say what plainly? Lin May turned then. Her face held no flirtation, no pleading, only a kind of deliberate honesty that was almost harder to face. I am not fit for any man, she said, not in the way people mean when they speak of wives. Nathan went still. She continued before he could answer. I do not ask for that place. I do not expect it. I know what people see when they look at me. A widow, a foreign woman, someone who comes with too much past and no proper name to anchor her in their world. She drew one careful breath. But I can love your children. If you let me, I can do that with my whole heart. The wind lifted one corner of a bedsheet on the line. Nathan did not speak. It was not rejection that silenced him. It was recognition. The sheer, naked truth of what she had offered and what she had refused in the same breath. No demand, no bargain, no attempt to charm her way into safety. Only love, directed toward the most wounded part of the house. Because she had spoken so plainly, Nathan suddenly understood how lonely she must have been to arrive with that speech already prepared. When he finally looked at her, he found that his voice had abandoned him. All he could do was stand there and feel the old, locked rooms inside himself begin very quietly to shift. Nathan thought he would answer her that same day. Instead, he carried her words into the evening like a stone in his pocket, turning them over in silence until every edge had made itself known. I am not fit for any man, but I can love your children. There was humility in it, yes, but more than that, there was injury. Not the shallow kind born from one insult or one rejection, something older, repeated, absorbed, perhaps even believed. He hated that. not because he knew her well enough yet to claim outrage on her behalf, but because a person did not speak of themselves that way unless the world had spent a long time teaching them to stand outside their own hope. For several days after, Nathan became clumsy around her in a manner that would have embarrassed him if he had not been so tired. He thanked her too formally, avoided the porch when she was there, stayed longer than necessary in the barn. Once, when their hands brushed passing a bowl at supper, he pulled back as though touch itself might make some unspoken thing visible to the children. Lynn May noticed. He could tell. But she spared him the humiliation of naming it. Instead, she went on doing what she had promised, loving the children with a steadiness so unforced it slowly became part of the ranch's daily weather. She taught Rose how to stitch a torn hem with small, neat hands. She showed the twins how to wash up without flooding the whole pump area. She carried Anna out at dusk to watch the sky change color, whispering names for birds and wildflowers in Chinese first, then English, until the baby laughed at the music of both. The house began to gather habits again. Clean cups where they belonged, hair ribbons folded in a drawer, supper at a regular hour, mornings that started with less panic and ended with fewer apologies. Then came the day in town. Nathan had avoided taking Lynn May with him for supplies, partly to spare her gossip, partly to spare himself the defensiveness he felt whenever other men looked too long at his circumstances. But that week there was no choice. Rose had a cough. The twins needed boots. Anna had outgrown nearly everything. Leaving Lynn May behind with all 4 children while he made the trip alone would have turned one hardship into another. So they went together. Cheyenne was noisy that afternoon, full of wagons and dust and eyes. Nathan felt the shift in attention as soon as they stepped from the mercantile. Some people were merely curious. Some were cold. One woman looked at Lynn May, then at the children around her, and smiled in that thin-lipped way that meant the smile had no kindness in it. Rose sensed it instantly and edged closer to Lynn May's skirt. At the fabric counter, the storekeeper's wife asked Nathan, loud enough for others to hear, "Your new housekeeper managing well?" Before Nathan could answer, another voice added, "Strange help is better than none, I suppose." Lynn May lowered her gaze, not in surrender, in endurance. Nathan set the spool of thread he was holding back on the counter with such force the wood clicked. "Her name is Mrs. Lynn," he said, his voice flat as planed timber. "And she manages this family better than most people manage their own manners." The silence that followed was immediate. The twins stared at him. Rose looked proud. Lynn May did not lift her eyes until they were outside again. Once they reached the wagon, she said very quietly, "You did not need to do that." "Yes," Nathan replied, helping Rose climb up, "I did." It was the first time he had defended her aloud, the first time he had drawn a line not out of obligation, but conviction. That night, after the children slept, they sat on opposite ends of the porch while the plains cooled under a sweep of stars. Crickets worked the dark. The house behind them breathed with the soft creaks of old boards settling. "Why did you say it that way?" Nathan asked at last. that you're not fit for any man." Lin May folded her hands in her lap. Moonlight touched one side of her face and left the other in shadow. "Because that is how the world has spoken to me for some time." He waited. "When I came west with my husband," she said, "we believed work would protect us. We believed if we kept our heads down and lived carefully, sorrow might pass over our door." A faint smile crossed her mouth, but there was no joy in it. Sorrow does not honor such bargains. She told him then, not everything, not with tears. Lin May did not tell her story like someone performing pain for comfort. She told it the way a person unwraps a wound because it can no longer heal sealed shut. Her husband had worked on rail crews and in supply camps. They had a son. Then fever came through one settlement after another. First the child, then the man. By the time spring returned, Lin May had buried both and learned exactly how small a widow could become in a country that had never wanted much from women like her except labor and silence. There were places where she could work, yes, places where she could survive, but very few where she could belong. "So I stopped imagining I would be chosen," she said. "It hurts less that way." Nathan sat motionless. In all his grief, he had still remained a man among his own people. Pitied, perhaps, burdened, but legible. Lin May had lost family and standing at once, love and place, home and language. No wonder she had arrived with no request larger than permission to care for children not her own. He looked out over the black pasture and felt shame move through him, not because he had mistreated her, but because he had so easily accepted the world's smallness around her as something fixed. "You were wrong about one thing," he said. She turned. "You are fit for far more than this world has given you." She went very still at that. The porch fell silent again, but it was no longer the silence of strangers avoiding the truth. It was the dangerous kind, the tender kind, the kind that comes when two wounded people realize they have finally stopped speaking from behind the safest parts of themselves. And after that night, everything on the ranch felt the same on the surface, while underneath, nothing remained unchanged. Summer settled deep over the ranch, warm and wind-blown, filling the days with long light and the smell of sun-struck hay. Outwardly, nothing dramatic happened. No kiss, no declaration, no sudden transformation that would have satisfied the town's appetite for simple stories. What happened instead was smaller, and because it was smaller, it mattered more. Nathan began trusting Lin May in ways that could not be mistaken for employment alone. He stopped checking the kitchen accounts after her, stopped hovering when she took Anna outside beyond the yard, stopped speaking of wages every time gratitude threatened to sound too personal. When the twins scraped knees or tore shirts or burst in carrying some new trouble, they ran to either adult now without distinction. Rose changed the most. A child who had been trying to become useful at 6 slowly remembered how to become little again. She laughed louder, slept better, asked for stories instead of permission to help. Sometimes Nathan would see her sitting with her head against Lin May's arm, both of them shelling beans in the afternoon shade, and feel a strange mix of relief and grief so intense it nearly bent him in half. Clara should have had those years. Clara should have been there for every missing ribbon, every fevered night, every small triumph. Loving the peace Lin May brought into the house did not erase that truth. It made it ache differently. Lin May seemed to understand this without being told. She never stepped into Clara's memory as if it were an empty room waiting to be claimed. When the children mentioned their mother, Lin May listened. When Rose brought out one of Clara's old aprons and asked if it could be altered to fit her doll, Lin May said, "We should ask your father first. Some things are cloth, and some things are remembrance." Nathan heard that from the doorway and had to turn away for a moment. Then came the storm. Not a catastrophe, not the kind that tears roofs free, just one of those sudden prairie summer storms that arrive in a wall of wind and rain, catching washing on the line and children in the yard. The twins were halfway to the creek when thunder cracked. Rose screamed for them. Anna began crying from the porch. Nathan ran from the barn, already soaked by the time he reached the yard. But Lin May was faster. She had Rose in one hand, Anna in the other arm, and was shouting the twins' names with a command that cut through rain like a bell. Matthew came first, slipping in mud. Noah followed a second later, breathless and frightened, though trying hard not to look it. Lin May dropped to her knees in the storm itself, pulled both boys against her, and did the simplest, most devastating thing Nathan had seen in months. She counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Over and over, against their wet hair and frightened faces, as if the number itself were prayer, as if she had once lost count of her own and never recovered from it. Nathan stopped moving. His chest gave way then, not into romance exactly, not yet, but into certainty. This was no hired kindness, no temporary usefulness. This was a woman who loved his children in the language of fear, in the language of memory, in the language only the bereaved truly understand. That night, after dry clothes and hot soup and 4 finally sleeping children, Nathan found Lin May in the kitchen wringing rainwater from a dishcloth that did not need wringing. "You were shaking out there," he said. She kept her eyes on the cloth. "Storms can make children disappear quickly." "Yes," he said, "but you were counting before anyone was lost." Her hand stopped. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, almost too quietly to hear, "I still count." Nathan moved closer, not enough to crowd her, just enough to let her know he would stay if she wanted him to. "When my boy died," she whispered, "I woke for months, reaching into the dark to make sure he was still there. Even after I buried him, even after I knew." Her voice tightened, then steadied by force. Sometimes grief teaches the body a habit the mind cannot break. Nathan did not think. He reached for her hand. Lin May looked down at it as though touch, freely given, had become foreign. "You do not need to apologize for loving the dead and the living at once," he said. Her fingers trembled once inside his. This time the silence between them was not uncertain. It was full. A week later, the town made itself ugly again. At church social tables and water pumps, people began speaking more openly. A widower, a Chinese woman, 4 children. Too familiar, too close. One man, foolish with the false bravery of public opinion, suggested within Nathan's hearing that the arrangement had turned improper. Nathan crossed the distance between them so fast, chairs scraped. "There is more decency in that woman's little finger," he said, low and deadly, "than in the mouths of people who use her grief for amusement." No one answered. The story spread anyway. But so did something else. The unmistakable fact that Nathan Hale no longer spoke of Lynn May as though she were passing through. And once a man starts defending a place for someone before the world has granted that place, he is already halfway to naming what they mean to him. Nathan knew it. Lynn May knew it. The only question left was whether either of them dared to speak it before fear found another way to silence them. The answer came not in a grand confession, but on an ordinary evening in early autumn, when the first coolness of the coming season moved through the open kitchen window and turned the whole house gold. Supper had ended. The twins were drawing horses at the table. Rose was trying to teach Anna how to stack buttons by color, and failing with dramatic patience. Lynn May stood at the stove, sleeves rolled, smiling at some nonsense Noah had just said. Nathan leaned against the door frame and understood with sudden, disarming clarity that he was no longer watching a woman helping his family. He was watching his family. The realization did not feel like betrayal. That was what surprised him most. For months he had feared that any new tenderness would be measured against Clara and found disloyal. But love, he was beginning to learn, was not a room with one chair in it. Clara's memory remained where it always had, woven through the land, the children, the habits of his own hands. Lynn May had not replaced that. She had entered the house beside it and brought warmth to the places grief had left cold. Later, after the children were in bed, he found her outside by the fence line, where the lantern light from the kitchen only barely reached. The plains beyond were silver under moonrise. "You should be inside," he said. "So should you," Lynn May answered. He stood beside her. For a while they listened to the night insects and the soft shifting of horses in the dark. Then Nathan said, "When you first came here, you told me you were not fit for any man." Her shoulders tightened almost invisibly. "I have been thinking," he continued, "that perhaps you said that because the world offered you so little mercy, you decided to speak its judgment before anyone else could." Lynn May looked down. "I won't ask you to be measured by the world," he said. "And I won't ask you to forget the life you lost." He drew one slow breath. "But if there is a way forward that does not shame your past or mine, I would like to walk it with you." When she finally turned toward him, her eyes were full, not with surprise, but with the strain of hope long denied. "You mean for me to stay?" "I mean for you to stay because you are wanted," Nathan said. "Not because you are useful, not because the children need you, though they do, because I do." The night seemed to hold itself still. Lynn May pressed her lips together, as if steadying something fragile inside. "I do not know how to be chosen after all this time," she admitted. Nathan's answer came without hesitation. "Then we can learn slowly." A small sound escaped her then, half laugh, half broken breath. She looked toward the house where the children slept. "I loved them before I meant to," she whispered. "No. And I think," she said, each word careful, "I have come to love the man who taught himself badly to braid hair rather than let his daughter go without." Nathan actually laughed at that, low and startled and warmer than any sound he had made in a year. It was not a dramatic ending. No music, no audience. Just two people standing under a Wyoming sky, choosing honesty over fear at last. But sometimes that is what changes a life. Not thunder, not spectacle. Just the quiet decision to stop refusing the good that has already come to the door. By winter, the ranch no longer felt like a place surviving tragedy. It felt inhabited again. The twins still ran too hard. Rose still asked too many solemn questions before bed. Anna still preferred being carried when she was tired. Clara was still spoken of, still remembered, still part of the story. And Lynn May, without erasing any of that, became part of it too. Not as a shadow, not as a replacement, as herself. Some people in town never approved. Nathan discovered he could live with that. Children taught him the useful mathematics of love. What is divided in fear grows smaller, but what is shared in tenderness somehow multiplies. On the first snow of the season, Rose looked out the front window at the white pasture, then turned and asked with absolute seriousness, "Does this mean we are all staying?" Lynn May glanced at Nathan before answering. He nodded. "Yes," she said. Rose smiled and went back to the window as if the world had just been set right. Years later, Nathan would remember many things from that season: the smell of bread in a kitchen restored to order, the sight of 4 children sleeping without worry, the sound of rain on the roof while someone else counted them safe. But most of all, he would remember the sentence that first broke open his grief. Not because it was sad, because it was brave. A woman who had been given every reason to think herself unworthy had still found the courage to offer love. And a lonely rancher, hearing it, had finally gone quiet long enough to understand that the heart does not heal when it forgets what it lost. It heals when it dares to welcome what mercy sends next.